I'm back with Guy Caron. So you did 8 years as member of parliament. You also took a run at the leadership. Were there other highlights you want to mention? Like, are there committees that stood out for you?
Well, I had many responsibilities at the beginning. Actually, after I was elected, you have to remember that with the Orange Wave, we had 59 MPs in Quebec, where we only had one in the past. We only had two MPs with some experience, Tom Mulcair, of course, and Françoise Boivin, who sat as a Liberal MP prior to the election. That was it. And I remember that in the first caucus meeting, I was asked by Jack Layton to be the Quebec caucus chair because I was basically the third person, the third MP with the most experience, because I was working in government relations. I was working as an economist for a major union here in Ottawa.
And you're probably one of the few who had run before.
No, we had a few who had run before, but running and being in Ottawa are two different things entirely. Yeah. So because I knew how Parliament worked, it was easier for me to take on that responsibility. But I did it for 1 year just to ensure the transition, and after that I served as industry critic, finance critic, through my experience as an economist. And the last year, or even the last 6 months, I was foreign affairs critic, which is something I asked for after Jagmeet became the full leader of the NDP. And I really wanted to have a different challenge than being a finance critic, which I truly adored. I loved trying to work an economic platform, an economic vision for the party, but also to look at different aspects of fiscal and monetary policy in the country.
Right. For a while there, between the time that Jagmeet Singh was elected leader and was elected to the House, you were parliamentary leader.
That's right.
How did that go? That was a kind of tough spot you were in, because people were sort of pressuring him to run, but you had to sort of keep your head down and keep going.
Well, my job was really in Parliament. The traveling, the work of outreach was really the work of Jagmeet as the leader, and my job was to ensure that everything was, like, we kept as high a profile as we could in Ottawa without his presence as a leader, because he still hadn't won a seat at the time. So it was actually quite interesting as an experience. I'm not the first one. I like to say that I succeeded Bill Blakey, who used to be parliamentary leader when Jack Layton didn't have a seat initially. So I was, like, we had that type of experience where Bill Blakey used to be parliamentary leader, and likewise I did the same, and trying to ensure that the work in the House of Commons would be consistent, would be high profile as well. And I had the help of all the caucus to do this job.
Right. So after 8 years, you see the new parliament starting up. What are your recommendations for them? What do you think the things are that they need to pursue most importantly?
The one recommendation, the one thing that I would like to see, and that's something I don't believe I will be seeing, but I'd like to see it, is truly a reform in the way that it goes. Question period is, in my sense, a waste of time. I will be blunt, it's a waste of time. It was a waste of time even when I was asking questions. A waste of time because it's all an act. I'm looking at the parliamentary system in Great Britain, and the question period in Great Britain. It's a lot more close. It's a lot closer to what it should be, simply because even government MPs are asking true questions to their government. It's really a time for accountability, and this is not what I'm seeing in question period. What I'm seeing is just theater with prepared lines and prepared answers, and without any new answers. We see that from time to time when there is really a moment to be remembered. And I remember Tom Mulcair examination of Stephen Harper during the whole Nigel Wright story about and Mike Duffy. That was amazing to watch. It's about the only time I've seen a true question period in ongoing. Now I don't see that. I don't see committee work to be useful, because regardless of the amendments you want to bring, government MPs will vote the way that the whip is asking them to vote, regardless of the accountability that should be brought by that committee of the government. I see amendments being rejected out of hand without being properly examined. I see omnibus bills being presented, and MPs, without having the resources, having to examine them within a couple of weeks. It makes no sense, and this is why our parliament is broken. And I would like to see a reform, but my expectations are very low in that sense.
Yeah. Do you think some of these things will be a bit different in a minority parliament?
No.
But surely the opposition can group together and hold the government to account better?
Could be if they had similar expectations or similar goals or objectives.
Yeah, okay.
They're not. The problem with the minority government, it should be the opportunity for the parties to learn to work together and to bring about compromise and to be able to have to build a consensus, basically, even within various visions. And this is not what we're seeing. What we're seeing in this case, like in past governments, is just trying to examine the best opportunity, or to try to find or grasp the first opportunity you have to form a majority government. Instead of trying to work together, you're trying to force your way through a majority, which will mean, in effect, that you'll be a king or a queen for 4 years, because all the power is in the hands of the executive. So seeing this, a minority government makes it a bit different, and obviously the party in government has to work differently to ensure that it won't be falling as easily. But I don't see it as that exciting, in the sense that it won't bring about change, and the opposition parties are not interested in using this opportunity to bring about change as much as trying to find the first decent opportunity to make the government fall and try to replace it.
So the politics carries on. And
Yeah.
is it more urgent, like because they're concerned there could be an election any time, that parties don't want to give each other an advantage at any time? Is that a possibility?
Well, yes, it is a possibility. You have to remember that the Conservatives now will go and try to find a leader, so there won't be an election for the next year, maybe 2 years, so that leader will have a chance to get known and will have a chance to present himself or herself to the Canadian population. So because of this, no one will want to have to go to an election,
Right.
and government will not try to. So they will be governing in effect the same way. And obviously opposition parties will not make the effort of making it fall for nothing. So even when they will be opposed to a specific policy, such as a speech from the throne or a budget, they will ensure that there is enough members absent so that the government will not fall. So it's a question of strategy. It's a bit exciting for pundits and for those who are observing the game or the horse race. But in terms of bringing about real policies, real governance, real accountability, it doesn't do much more than majority government.
Where are your signs of hope? Where do you see hope?
I think the hope is that we are not locked in a bipartisan consensus like we see in the US,
Right.
or even in some other countries like the UK, where it's basically between Labour and the Tories. Here, the fact that we have more than two major parties makes it possible for a third or fourth or fifth party to bring about that change, if they are able to carry that message to the population. And obviously the third, fourth and fifth in this case are the Bloc Québécois, which has a different agenda, but also the NDP and the Greens. So if there is a true vision, but also a way to get away from, to transform this issue into something else than the bubble issue, which doesn't carry to the population, then there will be a possibility of making a change. The difficulty with an issue such as bringing about proportional representation or changing the means of electing is too far. It's a process thing. It's not something that Canadians are worried to on a daily basis. What's happening in Ottawa is the same, but if we start with things that Canadians see, such as question period, which is the foremost window for parliamentary democracy in the households of Canada, and we can bring about change to demonstrate this can change, this can be relevant to Canadians, then maybe that will be the first step towards making other changes to make Parliament work better.
So we can live in hope.
We can hope, but the fact that it's not constrained to two parties in Canada, but we have other major parties, makes it, in my sense, more possible for reform than what we could see in bipartisan countries.
Yeah. Well, Guy Caron, thank you very much for this. Thank you for doing this interview, but also thank you for your service to Canada. 8 years is a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's hard on you, hard on your family. Thank you for doing that, and I wish you the best.
Thank you very much.